Hey everybody, today I'm going to share a little bit of my personal experience in terms of developing conscientiousness. Now, there's no literature that highlights that you could have conscientiousness as a personality trait. I believe that in most psychology, people believe that conscientiousness is just something that you are born with. However, I do have a very strong belief that conscientious habit behavior can be developed. I don't have anything to back this up. I'll just give you some anecdotes and how you might be able to pursue it. So what I've discovered in a relatively frustrating turn of events so far is that whenever I take a look at some entrepreneurs who are carrying out whatever it is that they do, they seem to be very excited about pursuing the direction, but they're not really excited about holding down the fort in terms of processes and systems, and this to a great extent gets me quite frustrated. It's not as if you need to create systems around everything, like breathe in, step 1, breathe out, step 2. You don't need to do that because those are unconscious behaviors. The problem is many impulsive, maybe ambitious entrepreneurs tend to apply creativity at a certain level where they talk themselves out of really building the right kinds of habits, the right kinds of procedures and processes within their business to be able to be sustainable beyond, let's say, 8 figures or 9 figures. And I believe that once you take a look at the comparison between small business and big businesses, you'll find that the difference is actually quite stark. Those that are in large businesses have microprocesses broken down so that individual departments and units know how to function. An army, for example, couldn't just go on the whims of a general who decides that he's going to just wing it. I mean, of course, we have some bright ideas that work and sometimes they don't. And I believe to a great extent, the entrepreneurial trait of being driven, ambitious, wanting to strive towards great goals and all that, that's all well and fine. But there's a certain kind of tension, the tension that prevents an individual from going much further because you're being drawn back by the vicious cycle you create for yourself. In other words, you strive harder, you get into more details-oriented problems, and then you can't deal with it, and then you start having to fight fire, which you don't like. However, preemptively, I've come to think that conscientiousness as a behavior, as a habit, could be developed. So I introduced the concept known as process mapping. Process mapping is something that I never thought I would use as an entrepreneur, to be honest, because I was just winging it. As a solopreneur, I thought that was, just crossing your fingers and going through life, and you win some, you lose some, that kind of thought. However, I've come to discover that process mapping makes it easier for my mind to work through the sequence of what needs to be done. Now, I believe that there are two forms of process behavior. One is logical process behavior. In other words, you could derive the logic. And the other one, which is learned process behavior. In other words, the logic is provided to you. You just need to follow the procedures. Both are probably just as powerful, but I do believe that whenever somebody gives you the logic behind things, you're willing to just follow it, it becomes a little bit easier for you to just simply execute on it and move forward. The disadvantage of just waiting for somebody to give you the logic is that if you don't have it, you're going to have to discover it yourself. There's so many very creative entrepreneurs who just wing it. They go out there, they do a lot of all of these things like, they test things out, they find that it doesn't work, they scrap it. However, there's a lot of it where it becomes very immature and it causes them to be unable to launch a product effectively, and they axe that product a little bit prematurely. Sometimes they have an initiative that looks like it's going to work well, but then because of certain ways of thinking, they kind of like pull back and it doesn't work out eventually. So I'm going to highlight a few studies, first of all, of conscientiousness. The first study of conscientiousness comes from Exel and Toth in 2008, within the article called The Big 5 Personality Traits and Entrepreneurial Status. What this showed is that individuals with high conscientiousness were more likely to become successful entrepreneurs. I don't think this is a coincidence. In fact, the next article is a meta-analytical review. This is quite old, in 1991, by Landy and Conte in the article Conscientiousness and Job Performance Meta-Analytic Review, and showed that conscientiousness was the most consistent and robust predictor of job performance across a wide range of occupational settings. So on one hand, we're saying that entrepreneurial success is more likely with conscientiousness, and we're also saying that conscientiousness is related to job performance overall. Then why is it that entrepreneurial training is not centered around conscientiousness. Why is it that every individual entrepreneur that I meet gets sick and tired very easily? And mind you, this sense of resiliency to deal with the difficult things doesn't seem to be very strong in many entrepreneurs. They don't seem to be able to push themselves to that next level, nor are they willing to look at the things that they need to do with that eye of detail. And instead, they just go back to the things that they enjoy doing. Now, I've said many times over my channel, the less you have time to practice, the less you have capability. And it becomes a vicious cycle. I don't have time, I don't have capability, I won't like it because I look incompetent, and therefore I'll find excuses not to have more time to do the thing that's necessary for me. So what I do believe is that the research pans out in many ways in terms of conscientiousness. I think it's a foregone conclusion that when you're conscientious, you can pay attention to details, you question some of the assumptions, and you go deep dive into some of these, and you work out processes. Now, does it mean that you need to go microscopic? I don't think so. But I think a lot of people get turned off by it, which is why I think there's a barrier that needs to be removed. How do we remove barriers that are uncomfortable for us, the mental obstacles? Well, I do highlight quite a number of studies that suggest to us that self-leadership is the number one imperative. When you're able to shift your attention, when you're able to focus on the mental thoughts that can get you to the results that you want, it's very easy for you to then dive into those details. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs don't know necessarily how to apply this. So I'd like to lay out perhaps a 3-step framework that could help you in your direction or your journey. If you don't have a high level of logical capacity, in other words, when you're starting to think about the steps, you don't have a cause-effect quotient that enables you to think through it and do it very effectively. Like for example, I know my co-founder, Alvin Poe, he's got a very strong logic structure. In other words, he doesn't need anything to really be written down. He just needs to discuss it, and things tend to get fleshed out quite easily. However, the average person is not like that. You probably need somebody with a relatively, well, someone with at least above average IQ to kind of like understand the logic behind things like that. So if you don't have the logic and you need to, like me, I need to sit down and I need to draft out the logic, the cause and effect, arrows literally. A leads to B, B leads to C. And I can see a downstream domino effect across a multiple variety of different factors. Then you may need to map it out in order for you to be able to see it and think through time. Now, one of my biggest gripes about people who are very impulsive is that when you're impulsive, you'll glaze over the details. I used to be like that. I used to glaze over the details because I wasn't comfortable in the details. I was literally fearful of the details. And one of the things that we need to realize is fear, when it grips you, it causes a lot of negative emotions, and you're just going to cause your emotional state to tumble. You don't want to do that. Instead, you want to take control, take charge of the kinds of emotional states that you have. We've talked about that at length in this channel, but I'm just somewhat frustrated that this information isn't getting out to enough entrepreneurs for them to be able to manage their states and to keep calm, and to also elevate themselves beyond just the fear so that they don't have to be so frustrated all the time. Yes, it is true, you can lean into your strengths, but do remember that strengths are just relative. So if you are slightly better than somebody else and you're able to do it, but here's the thing, if you do something and you do it out of frustration, and then now somebody comes along and is taking over your work and they are able to do it much more easily, you have a partnership with that person. Problem is, if you have not stretched your limits where you are doing work that you dislike, but you know that you're competent in doing it and you're able to put some kind of time in order to do it, you have the commitment, you have the competency, you may not enjoy it fully. May I dare suggest that you could learn to enjoy it? Because after some time, when you get competent at certain things, you're going to likely end up enjoying it because of the way you're seeing it inside your mind. Now, does this mean that you're always going to have to do everything yourself? The answer is probably no. But when you do see somebody who's actually competent at doing it, surely you share that leadership with them. You let them do what it is that they need to do. So in my mind, the first thing that stops a lot of entrepreneurs is the inability for them to structure their conscientiousness habits. So how do you build those kinds of habits? Well, firstly, you need to choose the battlefront that you're going for. For most people, they aren't able to choose the correct battlefront, and therefore they lapse, and then they have a lot of negative self-talk, and that causes them to be defeated in the first place. So my suggestion is plan your self-talk effectively. Give yourself enough to have that prompter to go and learn, to go and stick to your schedules, and you're probably going to be fine. When you're doing this reflection though, do it together with a team member who's a little bit different than you so that you can cross-pollinate those ideas in terms of what could I have done better. And that's where you add on that 1% or that 2% in order to grow and amplify the behaviors that you're putting in. Now, if you find yourself putting in a lot of negative self-talk that stops you from getting into your goal, this is a very big red flag. You need to dive in and figure out what in the world's going on with all of these internal self-talk. Have a diagnosis of your self-talk. Ask yourself, what are you actually saying? What do you really believe? And then apply some rationality to it. For example, when I speak to some entrepreneurs, they have this mindset that they can't sell. And it's 50-50. There's some people who absolutely love selling and there's some people who dislike selling whatsoever. So whenever I get into this mode of trying to convince somebody that they are not good salespersons, I always end up in this conundrum. They are so good at convincing themselves that they're no good in selling that I don't believe them at all, right? So the problem with being a coach is that I tend to look at the way you're doing it rather than what you do or what you say you do, because the difference is very stark. I actually do have a mentee who just hates selling. And one of the things he says is, I don't see myself like that. Well, then maybe you need to picture yourself being like that more frequently than you're not. Because the image that comes up inside your head that is negative about, let's say, selling is going to override the positive benefits of you being able to sell. So let's suppose you could sell. What difference would that make, right? And if you could sell, and there are a lot of beliefs about selling that unfortunately a lot of people are very poor in. They have poverty in sales. That mindset is actually not very helpful for you. You need to take it and destroy that. For example, the belief that selling is profiting from other people. Come on, you are profiting from people. McDonald's has turned it into a system. Therefore, everything is just going to go cookie cutter. You don't see people complaining that McDonald's is pushing their product. I mean, there are people who are complaining that McDonald's could be a little healthier, but they're most certainly not denying the fact that they are providing good service and they want that service. So couldn't you be that type of person? And in order for that to happen, the change has to first happen inside your head. So I'm baffled, my friends. If conscientiousness is the key, we need to hunt down conscientiousness rather than avoid it and then think, oh my goodness, this is terrible, I'm not going to enjoy doing it. You know what's going to happen? If I gave you the gym analogy, it's going to sound quite hilarious. You're going to develop your left bicep so much that it becomes so overgrown. And then the next time where your left bicep kind of fails already because you're doing all the heavy lifting, you realize that you've not trained your right bicep enough to be able to do that same movement. And the truth is that you become lopsided. And that's why people who are successfully lopsided are successful in one area. I urge you to strive to strengthen all areas of your life. Strengthening all areas of your life is not easy. And in fact, I might say that I have to point at myself first before anybody else. I don't think I'm strong in everything. I think I have a short memory span. That's one of the reasons why I need to write things down. I have an inability to keep track of mini processes. Therefore, I have things logged down visually so that I can keep track, I can go back, and I can serve my clients a little bit better. The problem is that I end up becoming stronger at that, and to a great extent, I remember more things. It gives me the feedback mechanism, and it sounds almost as if it's a new habit that's being formed through time. Now, if that's the case, my friends, then conscientiousness most certainly can be built. It's just contextual, it's very specific, but you can build it. And just like any muscle group, you go through a workout and then you develop that over time, you simply get better and better and better at it. Now, am I going to suggest that all of you are going to be able to do it? No, I don't think so. I don't think many of you will appreciate it. In fact, I think a lot of people will think, oh my goodness, this is so tedious. He's telling us to go climb a mountain, which I don't need to climb. I will just get a helicopter. I would like to forewarn against complacency and against the entitlement mentality, because I just don't think it works. I just don't think it works. I don't believe that business at the level that it ought to be done is going to be any more fulfilling if you walk away from those challenges. I would say walk into those challenges and then hang around those challenges for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, so that you find a better way, so that you develop a more effective approach in order for you to grow, to develop, to adjust yourself to a much more higher level of functioning than you were previously. So, key points. Number one, conscientiousness should be turned into a habit. It's not researched, but because conscientiousness is a personality trait, and I found that behaviors can mimic personality traits, you just need to develop strong behaviors. How can you behave and create habitual behaviors in a more consistent fashion? You shift your self-talk, you identify things that you dislike, you challenge those beliefs, and you find out something that's more rational from a cause and effect standpoint, so that you lean into that a little bit more diligently. And what happens is that the more you do that, the more you document it, the more you have process thinking. Once you've got process thinking, you just follow, and it becomes easier for you to have procedural or instructional self-talk. This way, you leverage the entire psychology of success in your favor. I don't know why this is not getting out to more people. It seems simple enough to do. What I like to tell people is that it might look tedious, but it's not mysterious. So the more you do this, the more likely it is that you'll gain some positive benefit. In fact, why don't you create anchors surrounding it? You do something that you don't quite like, you repeat it, you know you're good at it, and then reward yourself by anchoring yourself to a really good, positive, powerful state. You could quite easily brainwash yourself to do that. I'm going to tell you, I suppose I got to eat my own dog food, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to develop a new behavior that I dislike, and I've told people that I dislike, which is running. I am going to go out and I'm going to develop a habit of running over the next 30, 60, 90 days. And while it might be painful for me, I just want to demonstrate that this is possible to do, and I'll run a follow-up video. Stay tuned, hit the bell notification icon. I'm not the best runner. What I do know is that right now it's a habit that I might need to break, and I want to be able to do it just to eat my own dog food. So what I'd like all of you to do is to think of a habit you know you're capable of doing, but you don't quite like, and then start to do a 30, 60, and 90-day plan. I'll outline what I intend to do. For the first 30 days, I'm just going to grit my teeth, and I'm going to go at pre-scheduled times and complete a run in as best form as possible. I'm not going to push myself with timings or stuff like that, because I know my negative self-talk is going to come in. And when that happens, I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm also going to have to structure the time for me to do this. So I'm probably going to do this way early in the morning after I do my pull-ups. Once that is done, I'll make sure I document it, and then after that, do a quick debrief for myself for each of these 30 days, and then I'll report back after those 30 days. What it means is that I'll be doing this every single day, and let's see what happens as I do this record of self. What's going to show up? I have no idea, but it's going to be interesting as an experiment to do on myself. Hopefully you'll be able to do some habit change for yourself by applying some of these ideas and principles as well. So do I have a complete picture? No, but I'm pretty sure that as you follow up in the next videos, I'll probably have an answer for you based on the research that I've done for myself, with myself. So stay tuned, everybody. Learn to develop the capabilities that can elevate yourself beyond suffering and challenge, so that you can take more actions for abundance. Take care.